The blackness of space stretched forever, broken only by a few lonely stars and the cold light of distant suns. His ship was old, small, and weak compared to the giant freighters that crossed the galaxy, yet this little ship was his only home. The man sat at the controls, his eyes tired from long nights without sleep. He was a scavenger, a drifter, and today he was desperate. He had almost no credits left, barely enough to buy food for another day. He told himself this might be his last trip before he would have to sell the ship and give up. But then the scanner beeped. A weak signal appeared on his screen. Something was drifting nearby, lost in the void. He adjusted the ship and brought it closer. What he saw made him sit up straight. It was a cryopod, old, cracked, but still powered by faint energy. Its glass was frosted, but inside he could see the shape of someone. His heart beat faster. Cryopods were rare. Sometimes they carried treasures, sometimes corpses. He locked the pod with his ship's clamps and pulled it inside. The small cargo bay hissed with recycled air as he stepped forward, nervous but curious. With his gloved hand, he wiped away the ice on the glass, and then he froze. Inside the pod was not a human. It was a woman, but alien. Her skin was pale silver, shining faintly even under the weak lights. Her hair floated softly, strands like threads of light. She looked fragile, but there was something powerful about her face, something noble. She was alive. The pod readings blinked weakly. Her life was faint, almost gone. The man's throat went dry. He had no credits for doctors, no resources for advanced machines. Saving her would be madness. But leaving her to die? He could not do that. He checked the pod. It had emergency release controls, but once opened, she would be exposed to the freezing air. He looked around his ship and felt shame. He had no warm clothes, nothing clean, nothing worthy, only scraps and worn jackets. Still, he made a decision. He opened the pod. Steam hissed into the bay, and her body trembled slightly as she gasped for air. Her lips moved weakly, but no sound came. Her eyes stayed shut. The man rushed to his locker. He had only a few credits left, enough for a simple trade stop. He knew what he had to do. He set the ship toward the nearest outpost, praying the pod would keep her alive until they arrived. When he docked, merchants laughed at him. His ship looked like junk and his clothes were torn, but he ignored them. He went to a trader and placed his last credits on the counter. "I need clothes," he said, "for someone who's cold." The trader gave him simple but warm garments, soft fabric that could keep life in fragile bodies. The man didn't argue, didn't beg for cheaper ones. He handed over every last credit he had. His pockets were now empty, but he walked back with the bundle in his arms, feeling strangely proud. Back on the ship, he carefully wrapped the alien woman in the new clothes. She shivered, her silver skin reacting to the warmth. Slowly her breathing grew steadier. He watched her, unsure if she would ever wake. He wondered who she was. Why was she frozen in space? Who had abandoned her? Hours passed. He sat by her side, listening to the hum of the engines, afraid she might stop breathing at any moment. He should have been thinking about his own survival, about food, about fuel. Instead, his thoughts stayed on her. Then something unexpected happened. Her fingers twitched. Her eyes, bright, glowing faintly with alien light, opened just a little. She looked straight at him. The man froze. He felt her gaze pierce through him. Her lips parted and she tried to speak. Only a faint sound came out, like a whisper carried by the wind. He couldn't understand the words, but the feeling was clear. She was afraid. "I won't hurt you," he said softly, even though he knew she didn't understand human tongue. He placed a hand on his chest and repeated, "Human, friend." She blinked slowly as if trying to grasp the meaning. Her hand lifted weakly, pointing toward him, then toward herself. Her lips moved again, but the words were broken. Still, in that moment, something passed between them. The man realized he had just made a promise, not spoken with words, but carved in silence. He had given away his last credits for her, and now her fragile life was in his hands. Outside, the stars remained cold and empty. But inside his ship, something new had begun. The alien woman's eyes stayed on him until they closed again, her breathing shallow but alive, and the man, sitting beside her, whispered to himself, This changes everything." The ship drifted quietly through the dark lanes of space. Inside, the man kept checking the life monitors again and again. Each small beep of the machine gave him relief. The alien woman was still alive. but her condition was fragile, like a candle in heavy wind. He sat near her, unsure what else to do. She was now dressed in the warm clothes he had bought with his last credits. Wrapped in them, her silver skin looked less pale, but her breaths were still shallow, her eyes closed most of the time. Once or twice she opened them only to shut them again as if the light was too much. Every time she looked at him, he felt a strange weight inside his chest. He had saved her life, but why did it feel like he had also stepped into something far bigger than himself? The man tried speaking. "You're safe," he said slowly. "This is my ship. My name is Daniel." She blinked at him but didn't respond. Only her lips moved faintly, whispering sounds he could not understand. It wasn't human language. It wasn't any trade language he knew either. He felt helpless. Two living beings sharing the same air, but locked behind walls of different tongues. She tried to sit up once, her arms trembling, but the effort was too much. She fell back, breathing fast. He gently placed a hand near her shoulder, not touching, just close enough to show support. "Easy," he whispered. "You're still weak." Her glowing eyes watched him closely, not with anger but with caution. Like a wild animal unsure if it was safe to trust the hand offered, hours stretched into the long silence of space. The man worked on small tasks, checking fuel levels, adjusting the ship's course, patching a broken panel. But his mind never left her. Every cough, every sigh made him turn his head. That night, if such a thing could be called night in endless space, he heard a sound. Not the usual hum of engines. It was soft. A melody. He turned and realized it was her. She was humming, weak but clear. Her voice was unlike anything he had ever heard. A sound both sad and beautiful, like the echo of ancient stars. For a moment, he simply listened, frozen in place. Then the melody faded, her eyes closing again as if she had drifted back into dreams. The man whispered to himself, "Who are you?" He had no answer. The next day, the ship's warning lights flashed. A signal was approaching. Daniel frowned and opened the scanner. It was a patrol ship, not human. Its sharp design and red markings told him it belonged to one of the aggressive alien clans. He cursed under his breath. He had no business with them and no cargo worth stealing. But patrol ships rarely cared. They stopped whoever they wished. His ship trembled as the patrol hailed him. A rough alien voice filled the cabin. "Identify yourself. Show cargo." Daniel's heart raced. He glanced at the woman. She was awake now, her eyes wide with sudden fear. She shook her head rapidly, pointing toward the scanner, then to herself. Her hands trembled as she made a slicing motion across her throat. Daniel understood. They weren't looking for him. They were looking for her. He shut the cargo bay doors and dimmed the ship's power, trying to mask heat signatures. The patrol voice grew louder, more impatient. "Respond. Now. Or be destroyed." Daniel's hands shook as he tightened his grip on the controls. He didn't know why these aliens wanted her or why she feared them so much, but his instincts screamed one thing: don't give her up. He forced his voice steady. "Independent trader." No cargo worth inspection. Just passing through. Silence, then came the reply. "Prepare to be boarded." Daniel's stomach turned cold. He had no weapons, no army. Just himself, one old ship, and the silent passenger lying weak behind him. He whispered to her, "We're in trouble." But she was not silent anymore. Her lips parted, and in broken human words she managed to speak for the first time. "Run." The single word echoed in the cabin. Her glowing eyes burned with sudden strength, her hand gripping his sleeve as if her life depended on it. Daniel stared at her, shocked. She knew some human words. She understood the danger. Without waiting, he slammed the controls forward. The engine screamed as the ship lunged into the dark, breaking away from the patrol's lock. Alarms blared. Red lights filled the cabin. The patrol ship roared behind them, weapons charging. Daniel gritted his teeth. He had spent his last credits to save her. He had promised himself he wouldn't let her die. And now, even if it meant his own death, he would keep running. The chase had begun. The stars blurred into long silver lines as Daniel forced his ship into a sharp dive. The engine screamed, the metal frame rattled, and warning lights flashed red across the cockpit. He didn't care. Behind him, the patrol ship gave chase, its weapons glowing with deadly fire. "Come on, old girl," Daniel whispered to his ship, gripping the controls with both hands. The vessel was ancient, patched with scrap and prayers, but it was all he had. The alien woman clung to the side rail, her glowing eyes wide with fear. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing more. She had already spoken the only word that mattered. Run. Laser fire streaked past the cockpit. One shot grazed the ship's wing, sending sparks into the void. Daniel cursed under his breath. "This is insane," he muttered. "Why are they chasing us?" "Who are you?" The woman pressed a hand against the window, as if she could see something he couldn't. Her face twisted with fear and memory, as though she recognized the hunters. The patrol ship's voice cracked through the comm again, harsh and commanding. "Trader vessel, stop immediately or be destroyed. Hand over the fugitive." Daniel's stomach twisted. Fugitive. So she wasn't just a lost traveler. She was wanted. He glanced at her. She met his eyes, shaking her head furiously, her hands gripping his arm. Her silent plea was clear. Don't give me to them. He had a choice. Save himself by surrendering her or risk everything for someone he barely knew. Daniel tightened his jaw. Not happening. He slammed the throttle forward, pushing the engines past safe limits. The ship jolted violently, the hull groaning. Warning alarms screamed louder. The patrol ship followed like a predator chasing weak prey. Its sleek body cut through the void, far faster and stronger than Daniel's broken freighter. But Daniel had something they didn't: desperation. He pulled the ship into a debris field, an old battlefield from some forgotten war. Broken hulls, shattered weapons, and drifting mines floated like ghosts in the dark. The patrol hesitated, but Daniel didn't. He weaved through the wreckage, his hands steady despite his racing heart. The alien woman gasped, clutching the seat as the ship twisted between spinning metal. One wrong move and they would smash into floating steel. But Daniel's eyes stayed sharp. He had flown through asteroid storms before. This was just another storm. Deadlier, yes, but familiar. Behind them, the patrol opened fire. Explosions ripped through the wrecks, lighting the graveyard of ships in violent flashes. Hold together, Daniel whispered again to his vessel. Just a little longer. The alien woman suddenly moved closer, pointing at the control panel. Her voice was broken, weak but urgent. There, switch, Daniel frowned. She knew his controls? He hesitated, then flipped the switch she pointed at. Instantly, the ship's old shield generator roared to life, glowing brighter than it had in years. The next laser shot that hit them fizzled away harmlessly. Daniel stared at her in shock. How did you... But she was already pointing again, her glowing eyes alive with sudden determination. She wasn't just a passenger. She knew ships. She knew battle. Together, they twisted through the wreckage, dodging fire, hiding behind broken hulls, using every scrap of cover. Still, the patrol pressed closer. Daniel's ship took another hit, shaking so hard he thought the engines would tear off. Warning lights screamed. Oxygen levels dipped. He gritted his teeth. Running out of tricks, he muttered. The woman's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist. She looked into his eyes, then pointed to the scanner. A faint signal blinked on the edge of the screen. An abandoned war cruiser larger than anything else in the field. She whispered in her broken human tongue. Hide. Daniel understood. He guided the ship into the massive hollow wreck, flying through a gaping hole in its side. Inside, the darkness swallowed them. He cut the engines to minimum, letting the broken cruiser's shadow hide them. The patrol ship scanned the area, its beams sweeping over the wreck. For long minutes, Daniel held his breath. The alien woman held his arm so tightly her nails dug into his skin. The patrol circled, scanned again, then drifted away slowly, its red lights fading into the dark. Only when it was gone did Daniel exhale, his chest burning. He looked at her. She was breathing hard, but a faint smile touched her lips, the first he had seen. You helped me, he said softly. She touched her chest and whispered one word. Her name. It was strange, musical, impossible for him to repeat. Daniel tried anyway, stumbling over the sounds. She laughed weakly, a soft, fragile laugh. For a moment, the fear lifted. In the silence of the dead war cruiser, they shared something human: relief, hope, connection. But Daniel's mind refused to rest. If a single patrol was this desperate to catch her, then bigger ships would come. He had saved her life, but he had also made himself a target. As he powered the engines back up and guided the ship out of the wreck, one thought gnawed at him. What have I gotten myself into? The alien woman sitting beside him gazed into the stars with glowing eyes. She didn't speak, but deep down Daniel felt she carried secrets that could change his life, and maybe the galaxy, forever. The ship floated in silence after the chase, its engines running low to hide from more patrols. Daniel sat back in the pilot's chair, his hands still trembling from the escape. He glanced at the alien woman beside him. She looked calmer now, but her glowing eyes never stopped scanning the stars as if expecting more enemies. Daniel finally broke the silence. They called you a fugitive. Why? Who are you really? The woman tilted her head, trying to understand. Her broken human words were few, but she could see the questions in his eyes. Slowly, she touched her chest again. Liara, she whispered. Her name. Daniel repeated it carefully. Liara. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Then she reached toward his wrist, pulling his sleeve back. She placed her hand over his skin, then tapped her own chest again as if teaching him a bond. Daniel, he said softly, pointing to himself. She nodded. Names were a start, but he needed more. Why were patrol ships ready to kill for her? Liara's breathing slowed. She looked away as if deciding whether to trust him. Then with shaking hands, she pulled the fabric of her clothes down at her shoulder. Daniel's eyes widened. On her skin was a mark, a tattoo glowing faintly like silver fire. It wasn't random. It was a crest, a symbol of power. Even Daniel, who lived on the edges of lawless space, recognized it. The House of Varys, a royal bloodline. Daniel's mouth went dry. You're a princess. Liara's face darkened and she shook her head firmly. She pointed to the mark, then made a slicing motion across her throat. Not princess. Not royal anymore, exiled, betrayed. Daniel leaned back, stunned. No wonder the patrols wanted her. If the Varys line had enemies, they would hunt her until she was erased from history. Why were you in that cryopod? He asked, softer now. She closed her eyes, struggling. Then she lifted her hands, acting out fragments like shadows on the wall. A room full of others. Voices shouting, chains binding. Betrayal. Soldiers. Her hands gripped an invisible blade, then pressed against her chest as if stabbed by trust itself. Daniel pieced it together. She had been betrayed by her own people, locked in stasis and cast into the void. Someone had wanted her silenced forever. Her eyes opened, glowing faintly with anger and grief. Tears clung to the edges. She touched the crest again, then pointed toward the stars. Daniel understood. Her family name still lived. But enemies controlled it now. She was the last true heir hidden away. His chest tightened. This wasn't just about saving one woman. This was about power, about war, about the fate of entire worlds. He looked at her fragile form, still recovering, and shook his head. I'm just one man. I can't fight empires. Liara reached out suddenly, grabbing his hand. Her fingers were cold but strong. She looked deep into his eyes, her voice trembling but clear in broken human words. Not empire. Friend. The word cut through him. She wasn't asking him to fight for her crown. She was asking him not to abandon her. Daniel's throat burned. He had given up everything, his last credits, his safety, his freedom for this stranger. And yet, looking at her now, he knew he couldn't walk away. The moment was broken by alarms. The ship's scanner beeped sharply. A fleet signature was approaching, large and fast. Daniel swore under his breath. They're still tracking us. Liara's eyes narrowed. She leaned forward, her hands flying across the controls. Daniel blinked in shock. She knew his ship better than he did. She opened hidden menus he had never touched, adjusting systems with surprising skill. What are you? He began. She pointed to the star map, then to herself. Her lips formed the word, home. Daniel frowned. Your home? It's crawling with enemies, but her stare was unshaken. She tapped the crest again, then made a gesture like a flame spreading. Her home wasn't just danger, it was the key. Something hidden there. Something powerful. Daniel swallowed hard. He should turn back, sell her location, and buy a safe life. But even thinking it made him sick. He took a deep breath. All right, Liara, we go your way. But you'd better be right about this. Her lips curved in the faintest smile again. For the first time, she didn't look like a fugitive. She looked like someone who still carried hope. As the engines roared back to life, Daniel stared at the stars ahead. He didn't know if he had just made the smartest or the stupidest choice of his life. But he knew one thing. The secrets of her past were no longer just hers. Now they belonged to him too. And together they were heading straight into the heart of danger. The hum of the engines filled the small ship as Daniel guided it away from the wreck field. His hands were tight on the controls, but his eyes kept drifting to Liara. She sat beside him, pale but awake, her glowing eyes steady. The secret she had shown him, the royal crest burned into her skin, still echoed in his mind. He had rescued a fugitive princess, or perhaps, as she claimed, a fallen heir. Either way, it meant trouble. The scanner beeped. Daniel's heart sank. Another ship was closing in. Bigger, faster. Not again, he muttered. Liara's gaze flicked to the scanner. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She knew what was coming. The enemy ship burst into view, a warship, its dark armor glowing with crimson lights. It was 5 times the size of Daniel's freighter, with cannons large enough to tear his vessel apart in a single blast. The comm crackled alive. A deep alien voice thundered, "Trader vessel, you carry the lost heir. Hand her over now and your death will be quick." Daniel's jaw clenched. His ship was no match for this monster. Yet when he looked at Liara, he saw the fear in her eyes and something else. Resolve. He turned the comm off. "You're not getting her," he whispered. The warship's cannons lit up, and the void exploded with fire. Daniel threw the ship into a roll. Laser beams sliced past, shaking his vessel. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Alarm screamed. His old freighter wasn't built for battle. But Daniel had learned tricks in a lifetime of running from stronger ships. "Hold together," he yelled, slamming a lever. The freighter spun into a sharp dive, dodging another volley. Liara grabbed the side rail, her face lit by the red alarms. She wasn't panicking, she was studying the controls. Then she leaned over and pointed. "There," she cried in broken words. "Switch engine pulse." Daniel frowned but obeyed. He hit the switch. The ship jerked violently, releasing a burst of raw energy from its old engines. The sudden pulse threw off the enemy's targeting for a few seconds. Daniel grinned despite himself. "You're full of surprises." But the warship corrected quickly. Its cannons glowed again. This time Daniel knew they wouldn't miss. Then Liara did something he didn't expect. She pulled a small crystal from beneath her clothes. It glowed faintly, humming with strange energy. Daniel's eyes widened. "What is that?" Liara placed the crystal into the ship's navigation console. Instantly, light surged across the panels. Systems Daniel thought were dead came alive, screens glowing brighter than ever before. The ship roared as if reborn. "Ancient tech," Liara whispered, her voice trembling but strong. "Your ship. Now more." The freighter's engines screamed, but this time with power Daniel had never felt before. He gripped the controls, stunned at the sudden response. The ship leapt forward, faster than it ever could before. The warship fired again, but Daniel twisted the controls. His freighter dodged like a predator, slipping through the burning fire. "All right," Daniel muttered, adrenaline rushing through him. "Let's see if we can bite back." He dove the ship into a roll, slipping beneath the warship's belly. With Liara's help, he armed the freighter's old cannons, guns that had barely worked before. But now with the crystal feeding power, they glowed hot with deadly energy. "Fire!" he shouted. The freighter's cannons unleashed a volley. Explosions ripped across the warship's armor. The giant vessel groaned, shields sparking under the unexpected attack. Liara's eyes lit with fierce pride. She leaned closer, whispering, "Together." Daniel nodded. "Together." The warship turned, furious. Its massive cannons charged, filling the void with crimson light. Daniel's heart pounded. If that blast hit them, it would be over. "Hold steady," he muttered. Liara pressed her hand over the crest on her skin, whispering something in her own language. The crystal pulsed in response, and suddenly the freighter's shields flared brighter than ever before. The enemy fired. The blast slammed into the freighter. The shields screamed, but they held. The ship shook violently, alarms howling, but it didn't break. Daniel grinned through clenched teeth. "We're still here." He pushed the controls, and the freighter shot forward, circling the warship like a wasp stinging a beast. With Liara guiding him, they fired volley after volley into weak spots, engines, joints, power lines. Finally, one shot pierced deep. The warship shuddered, fire bursting from its side. Its crimson lights flickered and dimmed. The giant vessel drifted, crippled, smoke and flame spilling into the void. Daniel slumped in his seat, sweat running down his face. His ship was scarred, systems failing, but alive. Against all odds, they had survived. He looked at Liara. She was pale, exhausted, but her eyes glowed with victory. You saved us, Daniel whispered. She shook her head weakly. No, we saved. Together. For a moment, silence filled the ship. Not the silence of fear, but of relief. Of trust. Daniel knew now this wasn't just about chance. Fate had thrown them together, and together they had survived fire. But he also knew something darker. The enemy wouldn't stop. This was just the beginning. As Liara leaned back, clutching the crystal close, Daniel whispered to himself, "What storm have we stepped into?" The scanner beeped again. More signals on the edge of the system. The storm was far from over. The freighter drifted through the black sea of stars, its hull scorched and trembling from the last battle. Smoke curled from the vents and the lights flickered weakly. Daniel sat at the controls, his face pale with exhaustion. He had survived battles before, but never against a warship. Beside him, Liara clutched the glowing crystal tightly. Her silver skin was marked with sweat and her glowing eyes dimmed with fatigue. Still, she sat upright, watching the scanners. She knew the fight was not finished. Daniel broke the silence. That warship, it wasn't acting alone. If they wanted you that badly, more are coming. Liara nodded slowly. She pointed to the star map, her finger circling a cluster of lights. Here, she said in broken words, safe. Maybe. Daniel leaned closer to the map. The coordinates led to a system he didn't recognize on the edge of known space. No major trade routes, no colonies. Just a lonely star in a single habitable world. Why there? He asked. Liara's eyes softened and she touched her crest. Home, the word carried weight. Not just a place, but something sacred. Daniel exhaled slowly. He had no reason to trust her. Every choice had pushed him further into danger, and yet he couldn't turn away now. He adjusted the controls. All right, we head for your home. The engines groaned as he set the course. The freighter jumped into faster-than-light travel, streaking across the stars. Hours later, alarms blared again. Daniel's eyes snapped to the scanner. Multiple signals, ships. Not again, he muttered, slamming the console. This time it wasn't just one or two hunters. A whole fleet was converging on their path. Sleek cruisers, carriers, and frigates, all bearing the same crimson insignia as the warship they had just defeated. Daniel's chest tightened. They're not giving up. They want you more than I realized. Liara's hands shook as she stared at the fleet, but instead of fear, there was anger in her glowing eyes. She pressed the crystal into the console again, feeding the freighter new life. Systems flickered, shields brightened, weapons hummed. Daniel stared at her. We can't fight all of them. We'll be crushed. Liara turned to him, her voice soft but firm. Not fight, call. Call. Before Daniel could ask more, she whispered in her own language, words flowing like music. The crystal pulsed brighter, sending waves of energy rippling through space. The scanners went wild. A signal burst out in every direction, louder than anything the freighter had ever sent. Daniel's stomach dropped. What did you just do? Liara's eyes never left the stars. Beacon. Moments later, the fleet reacted. Cruisers turned sharply. Frigates fanned out. Carriers unleashed drones. They had picked up the signal, and they were closing in fast. Daniel slammed the controls, weaving through space. Laser fire lit the void, chasing them like fireflies of death. The freighter shook under the strain, sparks raining down. Liara, you called them straight to us, Daniel shouted. She grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Her glowing eyes locked onto his. Not only them, her words chilled him. If the beacon had called enemies, then who else had it summoned? As the fleet closed in, the void rippled. From hyperspace, new ships arrived. Not enemy ships. Different. Their hulls gleamed silver, their designs elegant and old, marked with the same crest that burned on Liara's skin. Daniel's mouth fell open. Reinforcements. Liara's eyes glowed with sudden tears. She whispered, family. The new fleet cut into the battle, silver ships colliding with crimson ones in flashes of fire and light. The void exploded with chaos as war spread across the system. Daniel pushed the freighter through the storm, weaving between blasts. Everywhere he looked, giant warships clashed, drones screamed, fighters danced like angry insects. The freighter was a leaf in a hurricane. Liara sat beside him, calm despite the chaos. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Together, she said again. Daniel met her gaze and nodded. Together. They dodged fire, slipping between wrecks, racing for the planet below. Its blue-green surface grew larger on the screen. Almost there. Daniel shouted over the alarms, but the scanner screamed again, another signal, larger than anything else. From the darkness emerged a dreadnought, a beast of metal longer than a city, its cannons glowing like suns. Both fleets halted their fire as the monster appeared. Its crimson lights marked it as the enemy's true flagship. Daniel's blood ran cold. That thing could wipe out this entire system. Liara's face hardened. She pressed the crystal to the console again, whispering words Daniel couldn't understand. The freighter trembled, its systems overloading, the crystal glowing brighter than ever. The dreadnought turned its massive guns toward them. Daniel's voice broke. "They're aiming at us." Liara looked at him, her glowing eyes fierce and calm. She whispered one word, full of meaning, full of trust. "Believe." The crystal flared like a star, filling the cockpit with blinding light. And then, everything changed. The cockpit glowed white as the crystal flared like a newborn star. Daniel shielded his eyes, his heart hammering. The ship trembled, yet it did not break. Instead, energy surged through every circuit, stronger than anything he had ever felt. Outside, the battlefield froze for a heartbeat. Both silver and crimson fleets turned toward the blinding light. Even the monstrous dreadnought seemed to hesitate, its giant cannons powering down for a brief moment as if uncertain. Then the light expanded, pushing outward in waves. The freighter was at its center, transformed. Cracks in its hull sealed, broken panels healed, and engines glowed with power that no human machine had ever held. Daniel stared in shock. What did you do?" Liara's hands rested on the crystal, her glowing eyes burning brighter than ever. "Awakened," she whispered. "Old gift. Meant for air." Daniel's throat went dry. The freighter wasn't just a ship anymore. It had become something else. Something alive with ancient energy. The dreadnought roared back to life, its crimson guns powering up again. The fleet opened fire. Beams of deadly light shot toward them. Daniel braced for death. But the freighter moved on its own. Shields flared, catching the blasts like harmless sparks. The ship leapt forward with impossible speed, weaving through fire as if it danced. Daniel's hand stayed on the controls, but he realized he wasn't flying alone. Liara guided the crystal, and the ship responded to both of them. Man and alien together as one vessel. He laughed breathlessly. "Guess we're not running anymore." Liara's lips curved into the smallest smile. "Fight. Together." And fight they did. The freighter's cannons blazed with light, striking the crimson fleet. Enemy ships exploded in showers of fire. Silver ships cheered through comms, their voices filled with hope. The lost heir had returned alive, and she was not powerless. Still, the dreadnought loomed. Its shadow swallowed the stars. One blast from its main gun could still end them all. Liara's eyes narrowed. She pressed the crystal harder into the console, whispering words Daniel could not understand. The freighter's weapons grew brighter, humming with unbearable power. Daniel realized what she meant to do. She wasn't aiming at the fleet. She was aiming at the dreadnought itself. "No," Daniel said, his voice sharp. "You'll burn yourself out. You're too weak." Liara looked at him, her glowing eyes soft but steady. "Not alone. With you." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had been drifting his whole life, a scavenger with no purpose. But now, sitting beside her, he understood. This was where he belonged. He slammed his hand on the console, adding his strength to hers. The ship answered. Together they fired. The blast tore through the void, brighter than a sun. It struck the dreadnought in its core. For a heartbeat the monster held. Then its hull shattered, fire bursting from within. The dreadnought split apart, its pieces falling into the endless dark. The battlefield went silent. Crimson ships scattered in panic. Silver ships advanced, driving them back. Victory belonged to Liara's people. Inside the freighter, Daniel slumped in his chair, sweat dripping down his face. His hands trembled, but he was alive. Beside him, Liara sagged against the seat, exhausted. The crystal dimmed in her hands, its energy fading, but she still smiled faintly. Daniel looked at her and whispered, "We did it." Her voice was soft, weak, but clear. Together. When the battle ended, silver ships surrounded them. A grand cruiser docked beside the freighter. From it came soldiers and nobles, their armor shining, their banners carrying the same crest as Liara's. They bowed to her, their voices filled with awe. "Heir of Varus, you live." Liara stood, weak but unbroken. She placed a hand on Daniel's arm, refusing to let go. Her glowing eyes swept across her people, then back to him. Daniel felt out of place. He was just a scavenger, a man with nothing left. Yet here he was, standing beside royalty. He expected her to leave him, to walk back into her world of power and duty. But Liara surprised him. She turned to her people and spoke in her own tongue, her voice firm. The soldiers bowed lower, their eyes widening. Daniel frowned. "What did you tell them?" Liara looked at him, her smile soft but filled with fire. "That you..." "Our protector." "My protector?" Daniel blinked, stunned. "Liara, I'm no hero. I'm just..." She pressed a finger to his lips, silencing him. "Not just human, friend, protector." For the first time in his life, Daniel felt the weight of belonging. He wasn't drifting anymore. He had a purpose. Later, as the freighter descended toward the blue-green world below, Daniel gazed at the surface. Liara's home. Cities sparkled like jewels. Rivers glowed with light and mountains rose tall against alien skies. Liara stood beside him, her hand resting on the console. She looked tired, fragile, but also proud. Daniel whispered, "So what now?" She turned to him, her glowing eyes full of promise. "Now, new journey." The freighter touched the atmosphere, its engines burning bright. For Daniel, it wasn't just the end of survival. It was the beginning of something greater, something he had never thought possible. He had spent his last credits to save a frozen stranger. And now that choice had given him a new life, a new destiny, and a bond stronger than the stars themselves. The journey of Daniel and Liara had only begun.